All right. Tape's rolling. Here we go. So, I'm going to say right on the front end that Chasing Squirrels is kind of taking a sideways step right now. And even before we get into the conversation this evening with Jocelyn Kervin, I'm going to put up front that this conversation and some of the conversations that are going to come out of this conversation may have a triggering effect for some people. We're going to be talking about some life stuff and some work stuff and definitely some teacher stuff that for some people may, it may give you some feels. It may give you some emotion. So on the front end, we'll just say that conversations this evening may trigger some deep thinking, some emotions, maybe a need to reach out and call someone. How's that? Is that a good lead?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, so do we start with the topic? Do we throw down and just say our purpose, our why for being here, talking again? So this is the third time that we're talking.
Right, we've connected a couple times in the past.
Absolutely.
About some really neat changes.
Mm-hmm. I hate to say the theme. So if this is the we'll also, I guess I could have put it in the trigger warnings at the beginning of this podcast that there could there be some laughter?
Of course.
Are we going to try and trip the dark humor a little bit?
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna take your lead on that one just so I know if I'm actually laughing at the right stuff. But yeah, we've talked 2 times previously. So in the beginning of Chasing Squirrels, there was a whole slew of people that were very, very kind to share their time with me to talk about education, changes in education, challenges in education. And at that time, you came in as a... Do you remember what we talked about the first time?
No, I remember the second time, but the first time was no. I'm trying because I think I'm mixing up conversations.
That's and that happens. I think that happens to the best of us professionally. It happens definitely. I communicate with a couple people that I've actually said to them. I don't know if I said this to you when I texted you
right
on Instagram.
So I'm like, okay, was this the first conversation or the second?
So our first conversation was all about you looking at bringing kind of digital technology a little bit into your music classroom.
Right.
You were talking, we spent a lot of time kind of unpacking how the arts and how the arts positions itself as a restorative and a connective element of a school community. Mm-hmm. You talked about the need for having within an elective area of study, you were talking about how key to building that community was also having extracurricular that's connected with your arts. So the trips and those cafe nights.
Right, those family building pieces. I remember all that.
Exactly. So
Absolutely.
That becomes the tissue. And I think we spent some time also talking about, because we did the trip together to Europe, which was fabulous.
Amazing.
And so that was our first time together. Second time together was about a year later-ish.
Right.
And that one came about because you set it up. So what was happening in the second convo?
I took a complete leap of faith and stepped away from the music class into the role of digital literacy consultant at the board, which was shocking in a sense. It's sort of...
Yeah, totally expected, I'll say, from my point of view.
No, because you aren't the only one to have said that.
Yeah, and part of it was obviously the podcast we had together, but full disclaimer, we worked together at the same school. We had discussions about kind of using tech. I think even we're right now using Soundtrap, which we've just spent the last frickin' 55 minutes trying to figure out how and by the time someone hears this on iTunes or whatever it is, 2 weeks, a week from now, there was a whole lot of kind of like, why can't we figure this out? So despite our digital depth, there was a little bit of a learning curve to get this, but not bad. 45 minutes, we figured it out, and hopefully someone's hearing this in a decent quality, and
it's all good.
That's the fruits of us actually figuring out that someone else gets to hear it besides us. But when we were, there was always conversations that you and I had about sort of injecting interest, injecting fun, injecting family, and I had a real good sense of that when I went on the trip with you to Europe as well. I could see the community that you were building there. So then when you decided to change, we had already had conversations in real life, we had several conversations. I remember sitting in the music department office and talking about how, you had this sense of change. There were things that, you weren't sure. It was interesting. I had a really clear sense that you were seeking.
And I don't know that I recognized it right away. And maybe until the job opportunity, it came up. And I kind of went, oh, yeah, maybe that is what I'm looking for. And it was a great move.
So then, so then you get this gig. And, one of the cool things that I found myself saying about you in that position is I always found myself saying, and I've done similar statements to this type before. I like saying when artsies get into positions of leadership, and I'm not saying that, the math teachers of the world and the English teachers, I know you teach English too sometimes, but it's not that I have issue with core teachers becoming leadership, but I thought there was something really cool about rep and leadership with the arts heart. Mm-hmm. The adding on the extra layer of, the arts with tech, with kind of connecting to the whole board. And I really, really felt that the spirit of what it meant to kind of be in a regional position, I liked the idea of you going into that.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed it, and I've really enjoyed approaching it from an arts lens. And bringing that to the activities that I get to do. Mm-hmm. So it's been kind of great.
It's cool too because you've popped into my school, and so I'm at a new school now, quite a distance from where we first met, almost as far to the west as you possibly could be.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much, eh? And it's funny to sort of land in a space and have colleagues from the past collect together into the new space, and at that school that I'm at, there's several expats from our previous school there. So that's the update, I guess, for kind of episode 1 and episode 2, and then episode 3 shouldn't be happening.
That's a good way to put it.
This conversation should never be happening. Not because it's it's good that it's happening.
Yep.
I don't know.
Things took a twist. That's a little unexpected.
Okay, so let's without further ado, here's the setup then, because everyone's like, okay, what the hell are they talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, where's this going? So I'm going to take you back to, I'll start with the text I sent you.
Yeah.
So let's kind of start that and use that as an explosion point.
Okay.
I'll let you share the text, because I don't know where you were, what you were doing, the moment that it was in. It was sort of a late night text. Mm-hmm. Set it up from your side, because to me, it was sort of like a Hail Mary text. Mm-hmm. And you can sort of shape this however you want. But are you cool with that, starting with the text? Okay.
It oddly could not have come at a more perfect time, in a sense. Because of the situations that I'm sort of facing now. The text arrived, and you asked if we could have a conversation about what I'm facing now. And it literally came probably a few days after I thought, I need to talk about some stuff. And I know just the person that I could have this conversation with. And then probably 2-3 days later, your text arrived and said, hey, do you want to have a conversation about all this?
So I think we've sort of done one cliffhanger after another cliffhanger after another cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna say the text.
Okay.
Is you okay with that?
I am.
And then you can shape it. Okay. Yeah. So I said to somewhere late March, I say I want to pitch you something. And you're like, okay, what you thinking? Mm-hmm. I'm totally doing your voice. I don't know if that's your voice, right? I'm like, okay, here it goes. Would you be willing to begin a dialogue with me on squirrels about cancer, multiple myeloma in particular? But the convo can broaden out to the learning, the challenges, and some of the changes that come along with the diagnosis. And then I used a swear word. I said, this is a blank something of an idea. I have no clear approach. I feel whack even asking, and I really, really hope this idea lands with you somewhere between let's talk some more or Clough, this is... And I just keep sending me funny gifts, and we'll be good. And I also said in there, this is also whack because I'm asking to have access to your process, and I totally get it if you'd rather have me piss off with the idea.
And by that time, I was laughing because honestly, we were definitely thinking along the same lines. And it was amusing to me because I immediately wrote back with LOL, love the idea. I've actually been thinking about chatting with someone about all of this.
I remember, though, I did send you the gif of fainting goats.
Fainting goats, that was appreciated.
So let me do full disclaimer on the front end.
Okay.
So prior to that, you had reached out. Mm-hmm. We spoke for 45 minutes or so, and you had let me into what was going on with you. That you had received a diagnosis of multiple myeloma, which is a type of cancer, and in that moment, I also shared that my father had the same cancer, and it was I won't say so much as like there was like this synchronous moment, but there was a yin and yang to that sort of moment of some feels coming back up for me, and the thoughts, and sort of right away kind of going back to being a part of his process, and then of course remaining present so that I'm part of the conversation that you and I had. Yeah. So there's our whole kind of backstory, and
I have multiple myeloma, which is a very unusual cancer to have at the age of 43. It's an unusual cancer to have in general, I think. But here we are. Mm-hmm. So it's been about, what are we at? April? So it's been about 2 months since things really sort of kicked off. So it's been a whirlwind of really changed world for the last 2 months. But here we are. Me and cancer kicking some ass.
So where are you? Let's branch out from there. Where are you? I know that we've had some other text conversations where you were talking about some spinal repair. I also know you had shared that you had some numbers and some conversations from your team, your medical team. But I also know one of the other key things that you had mentioned, and maybe we should kind of start there. You had mentioned that there were things in your life, you were getting clues that something was, I don't want to say off, but the body was giving you clues that something was going on. It couldn't sort of come into a picture. But maybe let's go back to there. What now? Sort of looking back. What signals? Yeah. What was your body telling you?
It's interesting looking back on things now. And actually, I was out today for a walk, And I thought, there were times last year that I would go for a walk and get unexpectedly tired or unexpectedly overheated. I know why now. I know that things in my blood system were not working well. So yeah, looking back on things, it's been about a year or more of little signals that didn't add up enough to, I guess, for me to come up with any sort of a picture. Or even enough things, perhaps, for doctors to put together enough information. So, where when you have a cold and you just about get over it, and then it comes back in a slightly different form or whatever. It's been that kind of a year of, well, my shoulder aches. Okay, well, my shoulder seems to be fine now, but I seem to have ribs that are sore. Okay, that seems to be better after some physiotherapy. That's great. Okay, hey, we're feeling really good. Let's, go and do a 5K run. Nope, I think we broke a rib. How did we do that? So there was a lot of things over the last year or so, including a lot of back pain, some shoulder issues, some weird rib pain, that I kind of attributed to the fact that I spend more time in my car. I spend more time at a computer now. I'm not in front of a classroom conducting music, so I wasn't as physically active in my daytime stuff as I had been. I was going to a gym that pushed me harder than I was used to, so I thought, well, maybe I've strained some muscles, that I hadn't used before. So there were all kinds of, I in my own head, I had all kinds of excuses for the individual situations. And it wasn't till Christmas time, probably, when I looked at things and thought, this has been too long. It's been too many random sorts of things. Something's not right. There's definitely something not right, and I don't know how to figure out what's next. So, but then I broke one more rib, which didn't seem to have any cause. I didn't bump into anything. I didn't fall down. I didn't, have my car accident fender bender. There was no reason for that to have broken. And that's what started the most recent sort of investigations that led to the diagnosis.
Can you remember a doctor's appointment that you had where something in your mind kind of shifted, where you thought to yourself, yeah, it's kind of not what we're talking about? Like, did you have a sense at one of the appointments, like you, not that you were onto something, but you were just off track in the discussion of what was actually going on with your health?
I'm going to say there were at least two conversations. I'm going to say there were two doctor's appointments where things didn't go down the road that I thought maybe they should have. I'm going to say back in October. So let's take this back a little bit. Back in the end of April last year, I badly injured my shoulder. I thought it was a rotator cuff tear. Something I felt something sort of let go and kind of pull. So that was in April, May of last year. Went for some physiotherapy. Things seemed to sort of come around. No big deal. But by October, the shoulder hadn't healed and was still causing problems. And it seemed to be, whatever was going on with the shoulder seemed to have radiated now down into my spine and into some ribs. And that's the point at which I went to the doctor again and said, this isn't healing. So he sent me for an ultrasound and an x-ray, and those showed something. I know now that it showed the beginning of a mass of plasma cells, plasmacytes, I guess, or whatever. That is part of what can happen with multiple myeloma. So in addition to it bothering your bones, it can cause these sort of small masses of cells. And in October, that showed up, but it could also have, from what I knew, it could also have been a tear in the rotator cuff muscles. So my doctor,
so a pretty standard injury, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Pretty straightforward, pretty standard. And my doctor said, okay, let's follow that up with an MRI. But I wasn't a major priority in a sense for the MRI. And in October, when I scheduled the MRI, or when they called me to schedule it, they said the earliest we can fit you in is March 2nd. So I thought, okay, that's not very helpful. What do I do in the meantime? The shoulder isn't healing. And there didn't seem to be a good answer at that point. So I just kind of went back to physiotherapy and went back to taking Tylenol and hoping that things would get better. And they did not. And then in January, I'm going to say, I went back to my doctor again and said, things don't feel right. The shoulder is still an issue. I'm still having pain. And he said, I'll send you to a shoulder specialist. But I said, at that point, the conversation was, but my ribs hurt too. My ribs hurt, my spine hurts. There's more, I'm hurting in more places. And I don't think he heard me. Or I don't think he really listened at that point. So I didn't really get anywhere in that appointment, that conversation. But I knew I wasn't getting the answers I needed. And it was a couple of weeks later, or a week or so later, I think, that I picked up just the edge of a cold and got coughing over a course of 3 or 4 days. And the rib just went into excruciating agony. And I went to a walk-in clinic around the corner from where I live. And the doctor there said, I'm going to send you for an x-ray. And when the x-ray result came back, I got called back into the walk-in clinic. And I had this doctor this time that was probably just out of med school. And he's certainly the guy that I figure has saved my life, and is the reason that I know I have cancer. Because he very objectively listened to the entire history of the last few months that I had been dealing with. And he said, I don't like the sound of this. Let's dig deeper. And he sent me for a bone scan. And that was the beginning of, holy jumpins, something's going on. So yeah, it was this brand new brand new doctor, probably, like I said, not long out of med school, who knew to look at a bigger picture and put a bunch of things together, and said, let's dig deeper. It might be nothing, but it might be something. And lo and behold, here we are.
It's amazing how little it takes just to shift the perspective. When there's no longer the commitment to saying it's a pulled muscle. It's mind blowing to me, the scaffolded siloing that happens when you get fixated on one part of the health and all the sort of attributes that kind of hold you in its gaze.
Yeah.
And you just shift slightly and you go, but if it's not that, you kind of step back, and like you said, to be able to see a bigger picture that was completely obscured by, the focus just on rotator cuff or the focus on it's just a chest cold. He
didn't know me in any capacity. So he had no history other than the verbal history that we talked about in that one appointment. And I guess that's the perspective I needed, was that overall view. So
I remember for my father, the scans, the same scans. It was in the hips, and he attributed, before the bone scans came in, he attributed the pain that he was having, his mobility, to old age. And it wasn't until the scans were done that he described it, and I think his doctor described it as honeycombing. It actually looked like the bones themselves were getting hollow spots in them.
Yeah.
And
so I was going to say, so for people who don't know, multiple myeloma is a blood cancer, but it moves from blood to bone marrow to bones. And it's when it gets into the bones that generally it gets discovered. So it's not until then, because it weakens bones and it starts to create holes in the bones, and that's where we get fractures. That's why. So I probably have had 6 rib fractures or more over the past 8 months without realizing it. So probably the same thing with your dad, is that it wasn't until it was in the bones that that those holes start to show up. So in my case, it wasn't. It's throughout pretty much my entire upper body. So I think when we did the bone scan, it showed up on 9 different ribs, my breastbone, my right pelvis, my clavicle, and a number of vertebrae in my spine. So it was pretty solid. And I remember when those results came back, being absolutely terrified at that point. Because at that point, we didn't know, doctors and I didn't know whether it was something like a breast cancer or something that we had missed that had metastasized and moved into the bones, or whether this was a type of bone cancer. At the time, I didn't know about multiple myeloma. So I was sort of thinking, well, what did we miss, and how bad is it that it's entirely covering my entire upper body? So that was scary at that point. So that was a few days of panic. I remember getting the results back from the bone scan on Thursday afternoon, I think, and going out to meet friends of mine at a pub that night, and definitely sort of losing it at the end of the night, just sitting around with friends at that point and having those very scared moments. But that day was done, and the next one was ahead. So one foot in front of the other, and move on from there. So that was the toughest part, I think, was the waiting between finding out that there was really something wrong and figuring out what was wrong.
What was it like? Your process of, I think about the big events that we have in our life, and you sort of stack up who you're going to tell first. And then you kind of go, yeah, they're kind of important, but they really haven't talked to me much in the last couple of months. It's like putting together your wedding list, right? Like, we're going to get this down to 75 guests. And if we haven't talked to them in the last 6 months, they're cut. They're off the list. What was it like? What was it like for you? Sort of, did you, when you sort of came to the moment, you're like, okay, I have to start sharing. Well, you tell me, what was that process like? Like that moment of aha, like I have to tell someone, I have to tell people. Walk me through that.
It was weird. I didn't necessarily tell the people that I actually would have expected, in a sense. I didn't necessarily go to the immediate best friends, per se. I don't know if I didn't tell too many people right away.
TO for a second here.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in your world that's going to hear this podcast
Yeah.
and this is going to be like how they find out? No, seriously. Like, is there like someone that has like reaching distance to you where they're like, wait, Jocelyn Kervin? I know Jocelyn Kervin. She's my sister. No, but like it's not, no, but like it's like
maybe not quite that
not quite that close,
yeah.
but like
but there may be a couple here
one or
and
two
there.
people, and I'll try not to make you laugh.
I'll tell you. My parents were actually some of the last people that I told.
Okay.
The week that I happened to be going through the most of the tests, and the week that I ended up at Toronto General Hospital and subsequently at Princess Margaret, my parents were away on vacation for that week. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, there's nothing they can do from where they are. I have to go through various tests or whatever, and until I have something concrete to tell them, I'm going to leave it. So I did, and I didn't tell them until they got home. So maybe not my best plan of action, but it was what it was. So
the one thing I'll say is like within this is that everything that becomes your plan is the best for you. Mm-hmm. I'll say that flat out. So Ma, Dad, apologies if you happen to listen to this podcast, but
they know. Yeah,
because I am curious about a little bit about the a little bit of the psychology, a little bit of the thinking behind it. Mm-hmm. Who did you tell first?
I told a colleague, a colleague friend. That I'm quite close to, that the possibility of whatever was going on, that the possibility of it being cancer was there.
Did you say it? Sorry, and this is where I get really curious. Mm-hmm. Did you say that it was a possibility at a distance, or did you say that it is what it is?
I said it is what it is.
Okay.
I think I said it likely is a cancer. We don't know what.
Okay.
And then, like I said, I did tell a very, very close friend of mine. And then, other than that, I don't think I told too many people until I actually had full-blown diagnosis.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. So I told about 2, maybe 3 people throughout the initial stages. I think maybe because I didn't want to make it real. Mm-hmm. There was always, I was sort of holding out hope along the way. I think that it was not what the worst case scenario might be. Mm-hmm. Still holding out for maybe it's osteoporosis. we could deal with that. That would be okay.
Drink more milk.
Yeah. Calcium. Yay, calcium.
Drink more milk.
So there were still those moments of this can't be as bad as we think it is, right? And then the amazing team over at Toronto General did a really good job of squashing that idea. But that whole process was incredible. Just watching or being a part of an amazing system down at Toronto General and Princess Margaret, and the speed at which things happened when they really started to happen was absolutely fascinating.
Can you speak to that at all? So what do you? There may be some people thinking, I'm kind of waiting for stuff to happen. How did you? What do you see? What did you see? What's the images that? Like, what was your experience that's getting you to say that?
I don't know that I've ever I've never known anything to move so fast. I had the rib X-ray, for instance, on January, 24, 25, something like that, somewhere in that second last week of January. Had the rib X-ray on a Tuesday. Chatted with my super young doctor on a Thursday. He said, let's do the bone scan. I had the bone scan on February 5th, which was a Tuesday. And I said to the technician at the end of it, when it was all finished, I said, how long does it usually take to get results? And she said, usually about 7 to 10 days, but your doctor certainly could call and ask for them sooner. And at 10:30 on the very next morning, Wednesday morning, my doctor's office called and said, "We have your results. We need you to come in." So that was when things fell off the rails. That was when I got really scared. And it was on February 7th that I met with the main doctor at the walk-in clinic. Sort of the head family doctor kind of took over at that point.
So just time check on this. Is that?
This is first week of February.
Like two weeks. We're now within a 2 week time frame?
Yeah, week and a half sort of thing. But literally, like, from bone scan to things happening was like days.
Okay.
So bone scan on a Tuesday, phone call on a Wednesday, met with the doctor on Thursday. He said, "I need you to go for an emergency CT scan," which we did on Friday. That result came back on Tuesday of the following week. So now we're at February 11th, I think. 11, 12, 12th maybe. So yeah, a week later. And he called me at 10 after 7, Tuesday night on the 12th. The clinic closes at 8. He called me at 10 after 7 and said, "How close do you live?" I said, "I can walk there in 5 minutes." He said, "I'd like you to come over." And then we sat and talked for about an hour about what the CT scan showed. And that was where you mentioned the term honeycomb. That was where he said that there are lesions throughout your bones. And we can see that. And there's only a couple of possibilities that factor those sorts of things in. So at that point, he said, he used the phrase, "If you were my sister, I would tell you to do this." And that was kind of amazing. You know, he really was determined to make sure that I had the absolute best care possible. Mm-hmm. And so he said, "I want you to go to Toronto General Emergency tomorrow morning. And I'm going to give you a copy of all of your files, all of your scans, all your information. I'm going to give you a note. And I'm going to send you there and hope that they make this happen. Because we think we know what it is, but they need to do the tests." So that was on February 11th. February 12th, I went to Toronto General. Or February 13th, I was at Toronto General. February 14th, I was at Toronto General. They ran every test imaginable. It was incredible and amazing. And by February 15th, I met with an internist who narrowed it down to multiple myeloma. So probably within 10 days, most of it happened. And on the 21st of February, they had biopsied, to go back to my shoulder issue, the mass that in October was 1.5 centimeters, by February was 7.5 centimeters. And so they biopsied that. And those biopsy results came back on the 21st and confirmed that those cells were multiple myeloma cells. And they just basically reinforced everything we'd already seen. And I went to Princess Margaret to meet with my first oncology team on February 26th, and I started chemo on February 27th. So I went from a bone scan on February 5th to starting chemo on February 27th. And I've been off work ever since, which is weird. So February just kind of disappeared into hospital chaos.
So I wanted to touch on that. one of the kind of the approaches that I've had on the podcast is connecting with educators that, I mean, sometimes I tell my dog story. I may have told you how Chasing Squirrels came to be. Mm-hmm. Now's not the time, but the story of the difference where you are affecting change in your world or change is affecting you. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about the moments, maybe it's a moment or moments where you may have been looking at being a teacher in a different light. So, again, we'll do these full disclosure, like you're a teacher, you're an educator. That's that's how we've come to do Chasing Squirrels and Lads. That's how we met. We met through teaching. Yeah. And it is a through line. It is one of the intersectionalities of you and I talking right now. Yeah. And there's these great kind of abstract conversations that you can find on Twitter sometimes about, when people are going to retire from teaching, or they, what are they going to do? Or if I wasn't a teacher, I don't know what I would be, I'm characterizing, I'm putting the wrong tone. I'm not being overly sarcastic, but in the realm of that conversation, it strikes me that, they're not thinking about if the opportunity to teach because of your health was taken away from you. Yeah. And I'm curious about some of your thinking around teaching being taken from you. Yeah. And some of your thoughts around that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been tough. In some ways it's interesting that this sort of happened while I'm in the role of consultant, because I'm not in a classroom right now. And so I wonder, I think this would be a lot harder to deal with if I had suddenly had to stop teaching music. Like if I had been in a music classroom and suddenly, just all of a sudden could not go back to work, like literally couldn't walk through the door, I think I'd certainly be in a very different mindset than where I am now. So being able to sort of walk away from an office and know too, as a music teacher, you're often very isolated. Mm-hmm. You're often the only one in the school who does what you do. There might be maybe 2 or 3 of you, but sometimes you are down to 1. The role that I have right now as digital literacy consultant is very much part of a team. And so when I got sick, the moment that I had to step away, my team stepped in, and everybody just took things off my plate and just redistributed responsibilities and, made sure that I did not have to worry about anything. So that the only focus I needed to concern myself with was getting better and fighting cancer. And it was amazing. And I couldn't be more grateful for the incredible people that I work with, that made this transition easier, and made it more manageable to sort of just stop doing my job, which is not ever something I considered having to do, was just stop. You look at retirement, or you look at, are you changing jobs or whatever? There's some mental prep that kind of goes with that. I think sometimes you sort of gear yourself up to those moments. There was no gearing myself up for this. This was, slam on the brakes and that's it. You're done. Walk away.
So that was weird, and I'm incredibly grateful for the team that helped make it possible that I could do that without too much mental guilt, I guess, and without knowing that it was okay to do that. It was okay to walk away and say, I need to look after me for now. And I think if I was in the classroom, that would have been harder to do, because of course as teachers we always want to look after our students, and that's certainly part of who I have always been, is how do I make sure that they are okay. So I didn't have that burden at this point in time. So that's been different.
Maybe when we talk again, we can talk about, and we can talk in broad terms. So we can talk about specifics, about how one of the spaces that I'm constantly curious about, and I tweet a lot about this, is the amount of the good stuff that we put into schools. So it's sort of like we're doing things away from school to make education, the experience of school for others, awesome. And I like to flip that sometimes and say, what is it that school then does that makes our life away from school better? So where does it kind of reinvest in us? Where does it flip the metric and sort of say it's doing right by us when we're away from school? How does school make teachers better people, better humans? So maybe when we talk again, we can talk about some of the support systems that are kind of a part of our work. We're in the same school board. We can kind of touch on that. Without having work, because you're like on holidays right now.
It's
right?
so weird.
so without the distraction of having to do the 9 to 5, jealous. And I'm actually right now, sorry, this is one of the things I always forget about. Like, we've got a little video window up right now, and I'm like making faces at the camera, which are great for you and making you kind of giggle, but they don't translate well to audio, right? So right now I'm like making sarcastic eye rolling things. But without having, so it's a two-parter, okay? So let's say without having the, I know your job is not 9 to 5, nor there is mine, but that idea of having this sort of the scheduled day to go to, has that created any space for you to notice things about you, whether big or small, or sort of like these aha moments, not specific to the challenges of the day-to-day of dealing with cancer, but just the, without having to, no, this is a bad lead, I'm going to go to a different way.
Okay.
By having a measurable or noticeable amount of kind of free time, we'll call it holiday. What kind of thinking has that kind of sparked up in you? I'll do the big reveal that you bought a video game system, which I'm totally in like support of, because joy comes from that system. Okay, props down if Nintendo ever wants to actually sponsor my podcast, I would totally be down with that. But I know my kids would take a ton of joy from the Nintendo Switch. And you had mentioned that you bought a video game system.
Literally, I think it was like the third day that I knew I was going to be home, I ordered a Nintendo Switch. Perfect.
So here's the really clumsy question. Without the sort of distraction of work, what are you noticing?
Interestingly enough, I still feel guilty about sitting and playing video games for a little while.
You don't think like you should just have a T-shirt like I have cancer, and on the back that's why I'm playing video games. Like what's wrong with you?
It's true.
Oh man, see, there's the dark humor. There's the dark humor, right? Yeah. What's your excuse? That's I've got cancer. I'm just gonna totally do a long session on Zelda right now.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your excuse?
Playing Zelda.
All right.
It is weird. Now, granted, this past month or so I'm going to say up until a week ago, certainly my life has revolved around treatments. And because I had so much damage in my spine, mobility was a major issue over the last month or so. And I guess I didn't realize how bad that was getting. And that made my days very different. Because I was in a significant amount of pain over this last month or so. And really unable to move much or go far. I was very much homebound. And didn't realize, I don't think, how much of a toll that was taking on me physically. So last week I had spinal surgery, which was amazing. And holy jumpins, am I ever a lot better this week? It's shockingly different. Again, it kind of goes back to, how long was I putting off looking into this? Now that I know what I know. Anyhow, so now my days are more about what am I going to fill it with? Now that I'm more mobile, now that I'm feeling better. And again, one of the other differences about multiple myeloma is the treatment cycle. And I don't have the kind of side effects from my chemotherapy that I think people are used to sort of hearing about. I'm not nauseous. I'm not going to lose my hair. I'm not seeing those kind of side effects. So there are days that I feel completely normal. and I'm kind of like, okay, I should be at work. So that's kind of hard to get my head around sometimes. And yet then there are other days where I'm like, okay, I walked to the grocery store and back, and that's all the energy I have today. And I'm going to need to sleep for the next 2 hours to recover. So there are definitely weird days and normal days. And so not knowing how to fill those has been weird. I think it's getting better. I'm certain I'm sleeping better, which is kind of nice. Because that was certainly one of the things that was affected by this that I didn't realize. So I'm feeling better now, I think, and I'm trying to get my head around, what you do when you're not a teacher all of a sudden.
So no answers there? Still figuring it out?
Not yet. Not yet. Just like I said, now that I'm just kind of getting mobile again, that's starting to become more of a consideration.
Do you have a spiritual center? Do you have a sort of like that? Like, do you connect with any sort of religion or
I do not. I was raised, going to church on Sundays and so on, but it hasn't been a big part of my life recently over the last few years or so.
And I realize in saying that, like, I'm not suggesting somehow you should be spending all day long praying or like, hoping for, let's say, quote unquote, the miracle. Yeah. I guess it's more curious about that it sort of could be mindfulness or spiritualism or it's a grounding space. Exactly. Some place that you sort of anchor yourself to. Yeah. That kind of allows you to feel like you can be bounced around by some of the thinking or, a really hard level in Zelda. I don't know. But like you could sort of like that thing that kind of tethers you to what you consider to be like your rock. So I think that's just a sort of,
Yep.
Totally backing out of that question, realizing
No, I totally understand where you're going with that. And I think that's something I'm still I'm looking for that centering. I think a little bit. I think I'm going to need to spend some more time with that. I'm in the easy stage right now of my treatment. Come summertime. I think things are going to change, and I'm going to hit some rough patches moving forward.
But before we get to that,
that's right.
Let's back it up a sec, because you do have some. So with all of this, and we'll say the notwithstanding months, you had said that you are aiming to go back to work.
Ideally.
Okay, so walk me through that.
So this goes back again to the treatment cycle that I'm sort of looking at. And the standard treatment with multiple myeloma includes a stem cell transplant. But I don't need a donor match. They will use my own stem cells.
Okay.
So once we get into that part of the treatment, that's where things will get rough, I think. And that's where my body is going to really take a hit as we prepare for that, as I go through that, as I recover from that. So right now, with the chemotherapy that I'm on, that is literally just, let's beat the crap out of the multiple myeloma cancer cells, which is the stage I'm at right now. I'm feeling really good, and I'm very stable, and the treatment is going to stay the same for the next few months. So, given that I'm feeling the best I'm going to feel for quite some time, I think I'm okay to go back to work, hopefully in the next month, perhaps. In some capacity. Because I have a feeling that this is going to be a long fight. So I'm going to go back to work, and I'm going to try and get back to a little bit of normalcy over the next little while before we hit the hard stages, I think. So that's kind of the plan, tentatively.
I'm hearing in your tone that you're releasing yourself into the process. It's sort of like the checklist. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
We're going to do this. Is this you in the natural state? Are you a checklister kind of a person?
No. This is a bit new.
Okay.
This is the what do I need to do next is kind of the stage, the mindset that I'm in these days.
Are you foreseeing any, what are you kind of thinking about that return to work will look like? I'm trying to think, most intense case scenario was like when I came back from pat leave, and people are like, "Oh, how's your newborn son?" Like when I was away from school. But that's not this. That's not this. I don't even have any right saying that on this particular podcast. But you're going to be coming back like. Yeah. I have a little bit of like the scene from the end of Breakfast Club. When dude is walking on the soccer field, like with his fist in the air, right. And there's some like 80s, like, right. Like, what are you thinking about that moment of coming back into, like, have you played it out at all in your head? You're like,
no, not at all.
I got to go do a sound trap session over at such and such a high school, and I got to get in contact with Google for a thing, or...
Yep.
Is there going to be sort of like, do you expect a little bit of triaging when you arrive back at work, and you're just like, yo, I'm good. Like, stop talking. Yeah. I got an email to send.
And that's the thing, because I feel normal. Mm-hmm. I'm sort of going to approach things as though I'm perfectly fine.
Right.
I don't know how that will go over. And I still, there are things that I'm going to have to be careful of. I'm still somewhat immunosuppressed. So there are things I'm going to have to, pay attention to and be cautious of when I return. And my job might look a little bit different than it did, a couple of months ago in terms of what I can and cannot do. So we'll see. But it's going to be weird. There's no question about that.
Here's where we can kind of, let's say, escape for the evening. Where we landed was a little bit in that space about whether or not, kind of how powerful other people's perception is. And I think I had mentioned about how, people wanting to talk to my dad through the disease as opposed to talking directly to him. Mm-hmm. See, I'm realizing now if I don't have my headphones on, and again, I'm talking to the camera, I can't even hear you if you're talking to me. This is so ridiculous. Sound trap, we will master you.
That's right.
Heading back into work.
Yep.
Is there sort of projects that you're looking to get back on top of just because you feel like these are some of the loose threads that were in motion?
Absolutely.
Or, wait, it's an either or.
Okay.
Is it about getting back in there and just working?
Definitely both. There's definitely both. There are a couple of projects that I feel I definitely left hanging that I'd like to follow up on. But then there is that just that day-to-day of being able to go to work, engage with other people, do what I really love to do, which is the role of a digital literacy consultant. So I'm looking forward, just to getting back to just the day-to-day. And if that means that one day all I'm doing is answering emails and helping the odd teacher for 15 minutes, so be it. But there's definitely those pieces to look forward to as well.
Okay, so one of the last spaces that I think is kind of crucial to speak to. I will say, my father in figuring out what life was going to be like, it was sort of explained to him that multiple myeloma can be a live with cancer, mm-hmm. that you're going to include it in your lifestyle.
Correct.
Sorry. When we were off, our hiatus for a little 15 minutes there, I'm sharing that, I have sleep apnea. So me accepting that, there's no naps on the couch anymore. I've accommodated my life. If I need to have a nap, I need to go up to bed and I have to use my CPAP machine. Mm-hmm. So, as he was figuring out the new tools that he was going to have to use, I can remember, my mom and me we were just taking copious notes, the lists, the checklists, here's the person that you call. And I think in what I'd really like to be able to do, maybe we can at the kind of have I used to, in Chasing Squirrels, the podcast, it's talking about like a podcast in the third person, sort of throwing down some of the shout outs, but in this case, maybe it's closer to some of the cool resources. So if, by all means, if you're open to it, people can reach out to you to, make contact.
Sure. But
some of the spaces in that you have found or that I have found that, not to say so specifically a support system, but in order to find out more about multiple myeloma or other blood cancers or just wellness and spiritual support, how much is it for the new Yoshi game from Nintendo? Like, these are kind of important bits of information that you need to, for maintenance along the way. Yep. I'll throw out my dad was connected with Lake Ridge Health in Oshawa and Durham region, and it was a really great. I always felt like the information coming to me was specific enough to make me feel like I was on top of what was being explained to me.
Sure.
But it was also, I felt like I understood it to the sort of capacity that my non-science head could.
Yep.
How about for you? Any particular connections or shout-outs that you would want to put down at the end of our conversation?
It's the whole team at Princess Margaret has been amazing. But I think one of the support people that I have certainly come to appreciate in a huge way is my nurse practitioner. And I didn't even really, I guess, realize sort of what a nurse practitioner is or what they can do or that sort of thing. But I meet with my nurse practitioner every week when I go in for my chemo treatment. And that's been a real anchor along the way. She's amazing and knowledgeable, and it actually is, I believe, there at the end of April, there is a national conference for multiple myeloma. And she's actually one of the presenters at this. So she plays a really big role in supporting multiple myeloma. And it's been great to sort of have her back in my corner and be able to rely on her and ask questions and be, no question is too small. So those are kind of some amazing things that I have learned along the way. I think over the next few months or so, as I make this my new normal, those are some of the things I'm going to be looking more for. Are some of those regular support systems that are out there, and sort of to see what works for me, what there is available. The truth with multiple myeloma is that it's very rare in people sort of under the age of 60. So there's not, some of the statistics are not the same. Some of the support systems are designed for an older patient, in a sense. So I'm still sort of figuring out where I fit in some of those structures, I think. So it's going to take a little bit of time.
Have you, it just comes to mind, have you been connected with or met anyone else that currently has this type of cancer?
No. I have a teacher friend who let me know that her dad currently is living with multiple myeloma, and offered to connect me. I haven't had a chance to take her up on that yet. Turns out a friend of my parents also has it. It's sort of one of those things where the moment you mention it, then people start to say, oh, well, I know somebody with that. But as far as myself, no, not yet. I am going to go to the conference at the end of April. And they do have sessions for patients and meetups and so on, support groups and stuff that will be part of that conference. So at that point, there's a good chance that I will meet more people that that are dealing with it in the same way that I am.
All right.
So the new normal.
The new normal.
Mm-hmm. Living with multiple myeloma.
It's a good wrap-up statement. It's not a good title for a podcast, though. So on that, I'm going to leave that challenge to you because I'd mentioned I'm going to try and drop this episode sometime in a couple days. So between now and then, whenever this is released, you can get to me what you want to title it as. Between now and then, though, or even after that, so here's the thing, we're going to be, setting this free. This is going to be on social media. Do you want people reaching out to you to talk about this?
Sure. Absolutely.
It would be kind of funny, actually. Someone's listening to this and you point blank say, no, just listen to the story.
Just listen to the story.
Not contact
Don't want
me.
to talk to you.
So if that's the case, then
no.
It's your right. It's totally your right.
I'm still learning, certainly, about this. But it is, it's part of my world now, and it's going to be part of my world permanently. So if people have questions, I want them to be able to ask me or reach out with stories if they want to share their own. Absolutely. If there are people that have questions, certainly contact me and ask. I won't necessarily have an answer because I'm still learning myself. But I can certainly make some connections.
What's your pref? You want to throw down your Twitter, email? What do you want to use?
I'm on Twitter at jkervs, Jkervs. I definitely hang out there a lot. And that's kind of where I do a lot of my conversation. So I have an Instagram account, same handle, but I don't use it as much as I think other people do. So Twitter is kind of where I do most of my interactions.
I'm looking forward to. Sorry, wrong lead. I'm curious about. I'm curious about some of the conversations that will come out of this as it's connected with our PLN, because we do have we have overlap, right? We sort of touch base in similar spaces.
Sure.
So, I think there's a, part of the reason of having this conversation in the first place is that this is a teacher story.
It is.
Yeah, it is a teacher story. One of the intersections that is you.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's an ongoing story.
Like I said, we're going to have an episode 2.
As
if
I
there
learn
isn't
more.
an episode 2, then I made it really.
Way to
We're
cliffhang
at
there.
least going to have a second episode. There's the dark humor. Yeah. And again, there's me making a face at the camera that just won't. It's not going to be. It doesn't work because we're doing
all
audio only.
good.
But definitely commitment to episode 2.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Episode 2 coming up.
All right, Joss. Thanks for talking.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah. No.
Like I said, when you approached me, I said, I don't journal necessarily. I don't consistently write. I know some people suggest it. I like to talk.
Yep.
So this is how we're gonna chronicle the journey a bit.
There you go. You can throw in the link and say, "In your face."
That's
Telling
right.
me to journal.
You want an update? Here it is.
I journaled audio style
That's
with
right.
a theme song.
For sure.
Have a fantastic evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. I look forward to chatting again.
Absolutely. Episode 2 coming up.
Beep.